Hey, welcome everybody. My name is Stephen Legg. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Antigen Security here with Ben Harel from Illumio. Ben, you want to give a quick intro?
Sure. My name is Ben Harel. I'm the head of incident response and managed services at Illumio.
Amazing. Thanks for joining us today, Ben. We're here today to talk about a term that that sounds notoriously buzzwordy, but is not extremely known by all parties. Although it's becoming more well known because of the insurance carriers that are starting to require it. Um, Can you tell us a little bit about what zero trust segmentation is, Ben?
Sure. Zero trust segmentation is the ability to zero trust segmentation is the ability to control traffic between devices or network segments. And within it, there are like things like micro segmentation, things like breach risk reduction, and so on.
Got it. Okay. So ultimately, it's about that kind of endpoint, not just endpoint, but control of trusted communication between all sources within a network.
Exactly. So the reality is most devices are in about, I'd say 90, maybe 99% of networks are kind of free to talk to anything they want,
Mm.
which is obviously something that is leveraged for spreading attacks, not just ransomware or jumping around or looking at things. So if you really ask yourself, the question is how many ports or protocols actually have to be open for things that communicate? And the
Hmm.
answer is probably like you can count them on your hand in
Hmm.
most cases, what those things are. So it's really there to control and kind of reduce the attack surface, really.
Amazing. So, can you tell us a little bit about where the concept of zero trust segmentation originated and a bit about the history of it?
Yeah. So segmenting networks been around for a long time, and I'm not referring to like VLANs. I'm referring to like actually like segmenting communications.
Mm.
Uh, I don't know how good my history is, but definitely started, in the 90s. I remember doing traditional segmentation in data centers,
Hmm.
and up until about 8 years ago, the only way to really do it effectively, and I'm not talking about NAC or those solutions that have been around for a minute, was to use hardware. What we would usually do is we would create what are called private VLANs on switches. It's a special kind of VLAN.
Mm.
We would install physical hardware, so usually two redundant firewalls. So because if it goes down, it takes the network with it. And then we would build, I mean, this is networking speak, port channels between the firewall and the switches. The firewall would be a gateway, and we would configure all the segmentation that way. It's very difficult, very error prone. I mean, I could get really in the weeds about private VLANs, but compared to the solutions that are available now, doing it with hardware is the way it's been normally done. And it's proven to be pretty much not effective in most cases.
Well, and very difficult to manage day to day as well, and costly.
Oh,
Um,
impossible.
yeah.
Takes the thing doing the you're resubnetting, you're re-IPing, you're rebuilding a whole network that's built already. It's a very hard thing to do.
Completely agreed. I think you raised kind of an interesting point in how you were describing a lot of what you just said. Can you tell us a bit more about the difference between hardware-based segmentation and agent-based segmentation?
Yeah, so hardware-based segmentation is really programming switches and firewall CLIs, hooking up physical links, really touching the physical layer of the network and programming things. Agent-based segmentation is more of an abstraction way of doing it. So instead of touching the physical layer, trying to modify ports, firewalls, VLANs, you do all the orchestration on the agents themselves.
Mm.
So if you think about it, devices are what communicating, not switches and not firewalls, the devices. So if you can control traffic from the device in a scalable way, you can do segmentation. So agent-based segmentation is you have like extremely lightweight agent, collects all the traffic, on the device, everything it talks to, everything it communicates with,
Mm.
brings that up to a console and lets you write rules without having to deal with the physical layer of the network. So I'll give you an example. If I had two locations, let's say one in Boston and Seattle,
Mhm.
and I didn't want those locations to talk, or I just wanted those locations to talk on, I don't know, HTTPS. I could write a rule that says Boston, the location, and
Mm.
Seattle, the location, can only talk on HTTPS. Compare that to a physical network. How would you even do that? We're doing this, you're doing this without defining IP, subnets, VLAN. So that's where agent segmentation can shine. Since you're not messing with the physical layer, you can segment very fast.
Got it. Yeah, that makes total sense. Well, and that would enable you to kind of more easily zone segmentation to business functions or systems rather than being dependent on trying to create linear physical paths in hardware.
Exactly. And you can hand, a lot of the way most IT is today is apps, right? Like this
Mhm.
team is responsible for all the Windows servers, this team is responsible for this app, and so on. With this method, you know, networking guys don't love going into network, probably creating this really complicated segmentation. They
Mhm.
can do it, but it's not the most fun thing. With these type of solutions, you can give like the exchange team responsibility for segmenting it and making changes, and all those changes can go up to the network team or security team for approval. So it's not just like, hey, we could do this without touching hardware. We could like put some smarts into it, make sure that like changes are approved, and so on.
That's you're dovetailing into another question I had for you, which is, and you've answered a little bit, I think, on both sides. But if you were to unpack it and kind of what you see security teams doing with zero trust segmentation, why would a security professional want to implement zero trust segmentation?
Well, I'm gonna assume, I guess, but really, everybody talks about layered security, and a lot of times we kind of miss the forest for the trees because of all the marketing kind
Mhm.
of terms that come in: GTS, CTNA, MSP, MDR, whatever. Um, the reality is, if you think about most cybersecurity solutions that we blue teams or defenders use, they are reactive in nature. They rely on a detection mechanism. It could be a tip off, it could be threat intel, it could be a machine learning, AI, signatures, parent child process relationship, whatever. Between you finding something bad or automatically finding it because the product found it, it going up to the console and you taking an action, there's like a delta of time. If it's super well known, like a CrowdStrike, let's say, will block it instantly and report to it. If it's not as well known, like a little bit more novel, there could be, a couple hours between something gets picked up
Mm.
into console and then you taking action. The reason why security teams want ZTS is because that open coverage time between the teams seeing things and taking action, that delta can be covered by network segmentation. If you
Mm.
think about malware, I mean, in Windows case, it honestly spreads over the same 5 protocols: SMB, RDP, SSH, WMI, and so on. If you can control those protocols where you're not relying on detection to stop stuff from jumping around, you're just saying, like, hey, it doesn't need it to work. There's where the value comes in for the security team. It buys more time for them to react, it buys more time for them to investigate and contain the situation.
Got it. Yeah, no, those are certainly great use cases, and some of the reasons that our digital forensics practice likes to use it in active threat scenarios. Let's talk about kind of the flip side. And you touched on some things that I think are related, but I'm curious to hear your response. Why would an IT team want to use zero trust segmentation?
It's a good question. So it originated in the IT realm, right?
Mhm.
It's just, I would say, turned into more security focus in the last maybe 5, 6 years. First of all, visibility. Um, Understanding your network and what's talking. Everybody talks about it. Everybody says, oh, I have a product you can buy that can do it. But the reality is it's always kind of incomplete. So when you use a solution like zero trust networking or any other ones that are out there, the cool thing is from the second you put it in your network, it's going to see everything. It's
Mm.
going to see everything talking east west, everything talking north south, south north, and so on. So IT teams love it because they can see everything. The other reason they love it is it makes managing your network just like a lot easier. The second you get away from touching switches and firewalls, things get a lot easier and a lot safer. I'll give you another example why they love it. And this is true not just of Illumio. If you go into a switch, anybody's worked a switch in their life, and you type a wrong command and hit enter, there is no undo. You
Hmm.
can't like reverse the change that you did. Where solutions like Illumio, somebody made a change, you can see the change they made, when they made it, how they made it, why they made it, and then if you don't agree with it, you can instantly undo it across 100,000 systems. So that's a lot of the reason why IT love it. It just abstracts away from what is really a pain point for a lot of people.
Got it. That makes sense. Yeah, it makes that makes that management layer and visualization a lot easier. And to your point about backing out or kind of recovery strategy, it gives you the ability to just backpedal. Which is, I think anyone that's been on the CLI for any network device can appreciate that and how much of an impact that would have. So really, that kind of in my head raises kind of a couple practical questions. So the first of which is, wouldn't uh, from the way that the technology works and how it applies that protection to endpoints, wouldn't implementing a segmentation product break a lot of things when it's deployed? How do you guys avoid causing disruption post deployment to all of the endpoints that you're rolling out to?
So yeah, 100%. If you just turn on segmentation, it will break things. So first of all, and this is true of any segmentation solution you do, almost not almost all of them offer what's called a learning mode. When you take this tool and you kind of roll it out to everybody, um, the tool sits there and it goes, all right, I'm looking at a domain controller, I'm looking at a user endpoint, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at that, and it learns your network. And by learning your network, it starts making recommendations on what to do, like apply this. We have like I'll give you an example, and all the vendors have this. We have like something called a core services detector. You enable this, it goes through and it identifies like domain controllers, SQL servers,
Mm.
DNS, DHCP, and so on. So the action of just putting us in, we learn things. After we learn things, we start building policy, the rules, right? Like what I said earlier, Boston and Seattle, only communicate on these ports. The nice thing about all these solutions is they'll model for you what it looks like to have the segmentation enabled. So
Mm.
it will automatically configure, it will automatically tell you what it thinks it's going to break, and it's going to go, okay, Ben, if you turn me on right now, these are what's going to break. Here's what I'm going to lock down. And that's how you get around, causing the disruption. I can say out of hundreds of clients we deployed, we've never had a major disruption. We've never that I've seen. We've never like killed a domain controller, like killed any like custom app or anything. We might have here and there small things break, like this user couldn't print to this printer because they added it themselves and didn't tell anybody.
Mm.
That's an example. But generally speaking, because we're in there, we're learning, we're making suggestions. It's very rare to break things.
Got it. Yeah, that makes total sense. And to that end, that kind of the process of visualizing, learning, and then applying is really kind of directly implemented as a process and intended workflow within the platform. Is that accurate?
Exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
100%.
Yeah, no,
You
that
hit
that
the
makes
nail on
total
the head.
sense. Well, so just kind of shifting gears a little bit. Um, Talking more at like the organizational level, maybe we're talking about non-technical folks, people that are making other decisions for the business or working in other business units that aren't technology or security related. Why would an organization care about segmentation? If you boil it down, really, what difference does it make from an organizational level against threat actors?
Well, um, so one of the things we do is, and you do as well, is breach response and incident response. And first, what if we look like who's making people do this? At the end of every breach I've worked, at least, and Stephen, maybe you can share your experience a little bit bigger than mine.
Mm.
There's usually like a top 4, top 5 items, and they're always like MFA, EDR, MDR, zero trust, and like Active Directory hardening or like something along those lines. So is that fair statement?
Yeah, I would say the only thing I'd add would probably be email and cloud security.
Yep. So that started a long time ago, and nobody could ever do really good network segmentation. And now, because of how common breaches are, so a lot of organizations care about segmentation because their insurance is making them, or other group are making them, or they're following the CIS controls for compliance, and it says you have to do segmentation. The other reason they care about it is because when it boils down to it, spread is the main issue of malware. If like 4 systems got ransomed, would you really be that badly hurt by that, right? Like 4 laptops or something? Probably not. So a lot of organizations and those who have had other solutions see that they still get spread even with an EDR, even with other solution. So it's really kind of pushing down, I think, the requirements, and a lot of people are kind of noticing it in a way I think they didn't notice before, because it sat more in the IT function than it did in the cyber function. As far as the difference it makes against a threat actor, it makes a huge difference. If anybody knows what Bloodhound is, which is well known and like an open source tools for detecting Active Directory attack paths, that is 100% dependent on scanning AD and scanning the whole network and figuring out what systems I can jump to until I hit a system with a domain admin. On the other hand, if you have segmentation, that if you run Bloodhound on a fully segmented network, you won't see any other workstation. You won't see any other systems. You won't be able to query their SMB share and get back, who's logged into the system. Like, you can't do anything. So you lose a lot of intelligence. Now, that's not to say you can still go after Active Directory, and we have things around protecting Active Directory, but it lowers the attack surface insanely. Like Steve, you've run into this, I assume, that you had an attacker jump into a backup box, delete backups, right? Jump into a SAN array, delete.
That's a part of most ransomware gangs' playbook. Pre-encryption, delete the backups or exfiltrate them and then delete them, and then go own the rest of the network.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of our use cases are very easy to do, very fast. Like, for example, there's no legitimate reason for like anybody in the network besides your IT admins to connect to your backup, your SAN array, right? So that's like 4 clicks in Illumio and you're done. Which would be a lot harder to do in a physical network. So it really does, I think, make a difference from definitely from the spread intelligence collection perspective for attackers.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I guess to that end, really, you could, from an IT team's perspective, also you could think of it as a way to implement things like management networks and other, you know, outcomes of segmentation that would ordinarily be thought of, in the terms of hardware, or previously has been thought of in terms of hardware, but achieve those things in a much more graceful way that's a lot easier to manage from that point forward.
Exactly.
So let's say that a threat actor disables or destroys the agent. Can they bypass the protection that agent has rendered on the endpoint?
So it's when you're doing segmentation in this fashion, it's really, I don't like using this term, but it's kind of a herd immunity approach. And the reason I say that is, let's say they destroyed the agent on the system. They uninstalled it, they got around tamper protection, they got around like the process protections and everything. Every other system in the network has the agent. And every other system is smart enough to interpret the rules written, regardless of how they're written, to not allow that agent to connect. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I wrote a rule that said Ben's computer can't connect to any of Antigen's computers. And let's say I'm on Ben's computer and I deleted Illumio. Illumio is not, or any of these solutions are not like a traditional firewall. What's going to happen is every other system in the environment is going to realize that agent is missing, so to speak. And when the connection comes in from the IP that agent owns, it's going to block it anyway. So even if the agent's destroyed, you still have everything surrounding it, blocking it. So it's sort of like contained in its own little bubble of what it can access, but everything else is already set up. In fact, the way a lot of our rules are written by people is that if you don't have the Illumio agent installed, it won't let you connect. Meaning it's kind of, I don't want to call it like a knack, because it's definitely not a knack, but you could write a rule that says, if it's in the accounting group, which means it has Illumio installed, let it talk to the accounting server. If they get rid of Illumio, they can't access anything else. So that is some of the ways, if you destroy the agent, you can still prevent people from going anywhere.
Got
You
it.
can make it so like I can't connect to Active Directory unless the agent's installed. If you remove it, Active Directory just shuts down for you completely. The only thing that left is like DNS. So there are a lot of ways you can still protect even without the agent.
Got it. Yeah, and that's twofold. That's because of the behavior that you described, and then also kind of the underlying firewall rules are still in place even after the agent is removed. The agent is just no longer managing them. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
that makes it pretty powerful and a difficult control to disrupt. And I think people throw around the term defense in depth a lot, but don't really get how it practically should be implemented. This is zero trust segmentation, from our perspective, is one of those controls that's key to achieving true defense in depth. Because when combined with EDR, MDR, application safe listing, whitelisting, things like that, it it creates kind of a Rubik's cube that a threat actor has to align in order to actually achieve
Yeah.
anything, and that makes a lot of noise doing that. So it actually enhances those other controls also,
It
in that
buys
way.
you time, right? It
Yeah,
buys you a lot of time because
yep,
you, like you said, they're gonna have to get a lot more noisy for you
yeah.
to jump around.
Well, they can't just use an obfuscated command or common command and control framework to just sneak around kind of on the sidelines. They're going to have to poke a lot of things and figure out where they can go, what they can do, figure out solutions to circumvent each individual control. It puts them it extends the attack path a lot, I would say. And
Yep.
and that, to your point about time. Um, so in terms of how it actually like practically works, how does agent-based zero trust segmentation actually control the blast radius of threat actor activity? Is it all about those firewall rules, or is there more to it than that?
Um, well, the different solutions do it differently. Uh, just to be clear, like I can talk about how Illumio does it. So
Mhm.
the way we do it is it's very unique. We're the only ones who do it this way, not to like shamelessly plug us. So basically, our agent that deploys is not in line. It's not in kernel. It's in the user space on the operating system. It's an insanely lightweight agent, and it uses about 20 megs of install space. I think is the install file. It uses about 100 bits a second, not kilobits, bits. So it's insanely efficient.
Mm.
And what it does is, in the case of Windows, as an example, it programs the Windows filtering platform. So built into Windows is an API called the Windows filtering platform. The Windows firewall is actually built on top of the Windows filtering platform. So when you use the Windows firewall every day, that's the Windows filtering platform. So what we do is we don't control the Windows firewall because that'd be too ineffective and there's too many like workarounds and it's limited.
Mm.
We build our kind of own version of a firewall built into the operating system using the Windows filtering platform. And that's how we do the orchestration. So
Mm.
our agents, because they're not in line, I would think of them as like orchestrators. They're like a Ansible or a Puppet. They just program the API and let it do its thing. So
Mm.
because of that, you don't have latency, you don't have high memory usage or CPU usage. That's how we control blast radius. The other benefit to the way of doing it this way is that even if the agent is not working, the blast radius protection is still there. We're
Mhm.
programming something built into the very deep layers of the operating system. Even if our agent's gone, it's still programmed. Even if our agent's broken or you removed it incorrectly, it's still or tried to remove it, forcefully, it's still programmed. So that is something that's a very unique. That's how we orchestrate the blast radius, really.
Got it. Yeah, that makes total sense. In a way, the solution itself has multiple layers of defense, so it's almost like a defense in depth in a box, in a matter of sorts.
Yeah.
Um, so why and I can speak to our experience with this and my thoughts on it, but I'm curious to hear yours. Why are insurance carriers now requiring zero trust segmentation for their policyholders, for cyber insurance?
Um, they're the reason they're requiring is because recovery costs is what I think,
Mm.
and the forensic cost is one thing, and I think when you have a data breach, that's gonna you're going to have the forensic cost no matter what,
Hmm.
because somebody has to investigate it. But the recovery cost, that's a variable that could potentially be controlled a little bit.
Mm.
So if you're doing zero trust networking and you can prevent spread, you can lower the amount of time it takes to recover. So where an insurance carrier, and Steven, you're probably more versed in this than me, if an insurance carrier goes in and is paying, $180 an hour or something, I don't know, to recover workstations, it's recovering like 1,000 of them. If there was zero trust segmentation, let's say it's only recovering like 30 of them,
Hmm.
that's why they care about it. It's a huge money saver. And they know that since it doesn't rely on a detection, it's pretty foolproof. Meaning if I can't talk to this other system, I can't infect it. It doesn't matter what technique I use. If my traffic can't reach to it because it's blocked on the network level, how am I going to infect it? So I think that's why carriers are very interested in it. I think even though the White House announcement about people should do zero trust networking was cool and all,
Mm.
there were a lot of things that were going on in the background that were not part of that press release that I think affected a lot of decision makers and a lot of different companies,
Hmm.
which is pushing insurance carriers to require it for policyholders.
Yeah, no, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that that makes total sense, and I completely agree. I think a lot of this is true of a lot of both legislation and industry standards that are out there around segmentation in general as a concept in zero trust. And a lot of them describe the outcomes, but don't necessarily prescribe an actual achievable method for implementing and managing it, both short and long term. And I, in my opinion, that's what that is the market opportunity that folks like Illumio have capitalized on, because truly it's a problem worth solving. Right to your point, it's you know from our perspective and with the insurance carriers that talk to us about their underwriting standards and requirements, that's very much a part of it. Is cost drives a lot of those conversations. And I guess what we're seeing from more and more carriers really since like the beginning of last year, beginning of 21, is that they're starting to take a much deeper look with much more expertise, or tagging the right experts in to provide this perspective, because they're sick of paying out insurance claims for preventable breaches, breaches that could have been contained. And really, like anytime you talk to anybody in the insurance world, or in the cyber insurance world, I should say, they're always thinking about three things: scope, severity, and impact. And those three things are the primary driver of cost in any real breach. To your point, if four systems got breached as opposed to 4,000, the cost structure for recovery is very different.
Yep.
Reimaging and getting those things back up and running just takes tremendously less resources when you have a built-in containment mechanism already on the network that is difficult to circumvent from multiple directions. So that's my general kind of thoughts and concepts around it. Ben, really appreciate all the input and responses. Um, I guess what do you want to what note do you want to end on in this conversation? I know we're going to do a deeper kind of technical dive at a later date that'll be announced sometime before the end of the new year. But where should folks look? What should they be thinking about? How should they consider zero trust segmentation as a part of their overall security strategy?
I would say if you have EDR and MDR and MFA, that's zero trust is probably kind of the next thing on the pillars.
Mhm.
It's not the only thing. What I would also say is it's really hard with all the vendor FUD in the world to figure out like who's going to do what. So
Mhm.
something I tell people in general is when you buy something, just confirm it actually works. Because if you think about it, especially in security, we buy a lot of products and don't confirm that it actually can do what it says it does. Like how many people actually test the EDR to see that it picks things up,
Mhm.
right? So that's kind of what I would lead the note with.
Yeah, no,
Just test this out. We'll prove that it works.
yeah, I think that's something that the whole industry struggles with, to be honest. I do have one question that kind of popped in my head as we were talking about these last couple of points. I think a point of confusion to your point about marketing FUD and all the hype trains that are going in every security product's backyard. Um, what is the difference between host isolation and zero trust segmentation?
You mean like with an EDR, like host isolation, or
Yeah, like a lot of EDRs will say that they do segmentation, but
ah,
truly they're the feature on their website or in their marketing collateral will list it as isolation.
um, so host containment is containing literally a single host in a moment in time, and it's
Hmm.
very disruptive when you contain that host. You're killing its ability to do anything.
Hmm.
Zero trust segmentation is saying this host can work and do what it needs to do, but it's extremely limited what it can reach out to. It can only reach to what it needs to do in order to accomplish the task or job that the person using it has, or the system has with the application. So a host, the best way to boil it down is host containment is reactive.
Mm.
You're reactively containing a host. Zero trust segmentation is completely proactive. It's one of the few actually proactive cyber tools that exist out there. If you think about EDR and those are reactive solutions. So it's a proactive approach versus a reactive approach. And a lot of times, reactive is not fast enough to stop spread. You really need it there from the moment the incident starts.
Got it. Yeah, that makes total sense. And that in addition to your other comments is a great note to end on. Ben, greatly appreciate you joining me today. Really looking forward to our follow-up conversations. And as always, have a great one. And thanks everybody for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody.